Oh boy, I know this is going to be a spicy one, but all that I ask is if you're angry about certain news that has come out about FFT, the Ivalice Chronicles today, and which we will be discussing in this video, watch the whole video, get proper context, and then have a discussion in the comments if you so choose, and be respectful about it, because I will bring out that hide user from channel button. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and we learned a lot about the FFT remaster. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including my ongoing coverage of the soon-to-be-released Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So what is this huge news that we are going to be discussing today? Many of you have probably already heard it, but many more probably have not. There were two major developer interviews that came out today, courtesy of two different sites. The first interview was with Director My Hero via Square Enix's official site, and there was a much meatier interview with all of the lead devs of the Ivalice Chronicles via Famitsu. Now, of course, as always, and how it always seems to go with these games in the lead up to their release, this much meatier interview is only in Japanese, and as such, I read it with Google Translate. If there are issues that arise as a result, my apologies. If you have better information or a more direct translation of that interview, then do please let me know if I got anything wrong. Note as well, there is a ton of interesting niche info in these interviews about the development process of the Ivalice Chronicles, the challenges of rebuilding the game, the philosophy behind certain decisions that were made, and the thoughts and feelings of the dev team and the voice cast about the project as a whole. If you want to read those details for yourself, I will have the links to both interviews in the description. I highly encourage you to check them out for yourself. I will not be reading them verbatim here, unless it's directly relevant to major game info. That is our topic for the day. We have one exception to that rule, and as such, we'll hit that now. Did you know that the original game files for FFT don't exist anymore? Because I didn't. But apparently, because of data storage and production standards of the time, those OG files just do not exist anymore. Dev files apparently weren't considered important enough to keep a master file of, as there was no concept of future patches or changes at the time of FFT's development, and once a game was done, it was considered done. Also, in the case of Japanese titles, what files were kept were only held on to be passed on to localization teams in countries like the US, and those files were then directly written over to create a release of that game for those regions. This is notably why bugs like the Genji armor being able to be stolen came to be. Weird bugs caused by overwriting and manipulating existing code and files. So, for those of you bemoaning that this took too long to be released, or why didn't they just update the War of the Lions version instead or something, the answer is twofold. First of all, performance-wise, the War of the Lions version of FFT was just considered unacceptable to use due to the issues with slowdown, sound effects, visual effects, etc. So they had to rebuild the entire game from scratch due to the fact that all of the original assets were no longer available with the exception of certain art assets and the OST. This made it a far more difficult task than any armchair dev or YouTube commenter could have imagined, as I'm sure you can probably tell, and that puts to bed why this version of the game exists. Wanted to make sure that we had that important context out of the way, so now we can get into the discussion of everything that we've learned thus far, and we may as well start with the spiciest topic of all, because it's already been mentioned, what's going on with the War of the Lions content. It seems that the worst fears of many people in my comments and on the internet writ large have come true. The major War of the Lions content, such as special new characters and special new jobs, have been fully removed, or really not even added back in the first place, from the Ivalice Chronicles. The reason given is that they were not in the original release, and the team writ large wanted to preserve and recreate that original experience for fans old and new alike, and as such didn't see a place for those characters and jobs. It was absolutely something that they considered, but at the end of the day, because they wanted to preserve that original experience and recreate it from the ground up, they chose to leave them out. Now, while the interview specifically asked about those characters and jobs, other additional features, such as the late Chapter 4 battle back at the fort where you first wind up fighting Maluda, very murky what state different content like that is in, so I'll have to keep an eye out for that. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that additional scenes and dialogue, such as the Agrius-Mustadio relationship or the exploration of Wiegraf's motivation, have also been cut. The reason I feel this way is because we do know, and we will discuss later in the video, that Matsuno has added a lot of new character interaction, character development, backstory exploration, etc., and aspects of the War of the Lions release, such as these new relationships and explorations of backstories for certain characters, could very well have just been written in if Matsuno liked them. Now, maybe he didn't like them and as such cut them to add his own interpretations of what these characters are doing or thinking, as frankly is his right, seeing as how he is the original story writer and he didn't work on War of the Lions. But it is possible that different aspects of the War of the Lions release could have been incorporated in that way. We'll have to see. This section of the interview does also confirm that there will be no new jobs for generic or special characters in general, which, while a shame, is, again, understandable, especially as it seems that rebalancing of a lot of the already existing jobs has taken place. I can see why the team would want to really refine what already existed, not make something new and try to work it in while also rebalancing other pre-existing stuff, making the best version of the original experience that they can. Overall, I'm fine with that outcome as well, because I mean, if I wasn't, I wouldn't have replayed the game as many times over the years as I have, so I'm confident that the team knows what they're doing here and has made the right choice in leaving this content out. I know, a lot of people are going to be upset with me and with the dev team, and just the suggestion of that. If there's enough outcry, maybe it's something that can be added as free DLC down the line or something, who knows, but to me, I think it is a reasonable reason that this stuff was not included. Moving on to that discussion of the voice acting and dialogue, we do have a decent chunk of new information about that. As mentioned, a lot of new dialogue and characterization has been added, with one example being Marquis Elmdor. He's called out as not having had much really lines or voice work in general in either original version of FFT, especially not until, certain events happen with Lucavi and things, and then he gets more dialogue, because he's even really Elmdor at that point. So he now has more characterization, more dialogue, more of a role in the story, so he's a character that we care about more as his story develops throughout the entire campaign. This has been done for most of the characters, to the point that even Director My Hero states that Gafgarian is now one of his favorite characters because he has so much more characterization, he's so much deeper as a character, and of course the VA work that makes him much more compelling as well. Really, it seems like across the board, named characters have many more interactions with Ramza and each other, whether they be enemies or allies, to the point that it's actually very encouraged to try different combinations of named characters in battle to see who has interactions with whom in major story moments. The example was given of, say, Agrias, who is a major supporting character through the first half of the game, gets recruited, and then has next to nothing going on, or next to nothing to say in terms of dialogue, once her story is concluded after her recruitment, which is weird because she is such an important character. She has a major connection to Ramza and Ovelia and everyone else, and then she just doesn't have a lot to say about a lot of what's happening, and it's even worse for most of the other characters. There's even apparently going to be secret hidden dialogue that only activates under, quote, very specific conditions, unquote, which of course I'm particularly excited about. Whether this is just another way of referring to the previously mentioned character-specific chatter with bosses and the like, or if it's even more esoteric, weird, interesting little tidbits, we'll have to find out for ourselves, but seeing as how Ramza and Gafgarian apparently have whole branching dialogue trees now, this could be a pretty deep rabbit hole to jump into, and I can't wait to explore it. Also, it is worth mentioning that yes, all combat barks and spellcast lines are also voiced now for generic characters and unique characters, with apparently permutations of some of those lines as well, so that should add a lot of flair and pizzazz to battles as you go through them. As far as the overall sound design is concerned, there wasn't a lot to be discussed, but it was basically just stated that yes, the original OST and sound effects were used in Ivalice Chronicles wherever possible, and with as few changes as possible to bring them up to the modern standard, really only touching what was absolutely needed, which of course is going to make fans extremely, extremely happy. Whether everything is going to sound exactly identical to the OG PSX release remains to be seen, but at least knowing that it's not going to be that horribly compressed, flat, tinny soundtrack and sound effects from War of the Lions makes me extremely pleased, because it's going to make for a much more pleasant gameplay experience. Now, moving on to perhaps the meatiest section of the video, if not the most controversial, seeing as how we already talked about the War of the Lions stuff, we need to discuss difficulty and mechanics changes that have finally been revealed. We're going to go through these rapid fire because there's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to give my overall thoughts on this whole thing at the end anyway. So, first of all, the roster size has been increased from the 16 of the original, or the 24 of War of the Lions, to 50. Thank God. One of the most painful things about FFT has always been how limited the roster is. You get so many cool, unique characters, there's so many interesting monster classes out there, and then, you know, so many potential recruitable generics that you can kit out in different ways to have different jobs and different setups. It felt so limiting to be stuck with only 16 or 24 slots for your roster. Now you'll be able to have 50, you'll be able to experiment with all of the unique characters, try out a whole bunch of different monster jobs, and for us here, this means we can bring back a favorite staple of the channel for you guys and for me, community-submitted characters. I have to get a bit more information about how exactly this is going to work, how I want to be able to make it happen so that it's not burdensome on our eventual stream of the game once it releases. But for those of you who don't know, in games that allow the creation of custom characters and the building of an army, such as Tactics Ogre Reborn and Unicorn Overlord, I like to give direct channel supporters, and then if there's room, the wider community writ large, the ability to submit characters for me to use. Choose whatever different customization options are available, like job, what type of subclass they might have, if there's the ability to customize their appearance, what they want for that, what kind of battlefield role they want them to have, equipment that they would use, etc., etc. A way for you guys to represent yourselves in a game that we're playing together on stream as a thank you to the people who are directly supporting the channel, or the people who just watch and enjoy and comment as well, again, when I can make that happen. So further details on that once I get everything figured out, but we will absolutely be doing that day one as soon as Ivalice Chronicles is available to play. We also have a bunch of new information now about the different difficulty modes, what they're called, and what they're kind of going to entail in general. We have casual, standard, and tactical. Casual, as you would probably expect, is the story enjoyment mode. Very easy, or at least easier than the other modes, allowing people to just enjoy the characters and the build crafting and the world, which is good because FFT's world and characters are probably its best aspect. Standard is, well, standard. It's exactly what the difficulty was of the previous releases, bar any tweaks and balance changes that have been made to classes and the like. So if you want the OG experience, that's going to be the way to go. And then you have tactical for the diehard veterans like me to really sink our teeth into and see just how horrifying the developers have decided to make this thing. There's actually a decent amount of discussion about tactical in the interview. It is apparently quite brutal and it directly nerfs certain skills. The example was given of no longer being able to use calculators to spam wholly on the entire map, wiping all of your enemies and healing all of your allies in the process. Not a thing that you're going to be able to do in tactical. Whether that just means the calculator is heavily nerfed or they literally just don't let you use it, I don't know, but I am extremely happy about that. Now it's going to be more about the abilities and the jobs that you have than about your direct level, meaning that it's going to be less important that you grind and more important that you actually understand your team and maps and how things synergize together. But of course, if this winds up being a little too punishing, the difficulty can be changed at any time during the campaign. And that's apparently good because they directly say that the Wiegraf fight at Riovane Castle on tactical will make you cry, and the mood in general may make you wonder if it's even okay in terms of balance, which I know makes me very happy. It'll probably scare off a fair number of more casual players. Speaking of ability nerfs and buffs, though, there have been, quote, many small details, unquote, that have seen changes, with the Archer Charge +7 being an example that was used, as it was, quote, honestly useless, unquote, in the past, which is absolutely correct. I don't know if this means that charge as a whole has been changed, or if like the early levels of it have been kept the same, but then like later levels of it have been buffed. We'll have to see, but hopefully this means that those niche outlier cases such as Archer being generally pretty useless will be fixed and addressed, and we'll have more jobs that will be more viable across the entirety of the campaign. Fingers crossed, because I mean, up until the game releases, we're absolutely going to be continuing to do our Fixing Jobs series here on the channel, and I'd like to see what predictions or suggestions I want to bring to the table actually wind up existing in the full release. Overall, the game balance has been changed quite a bit, quote-unquote, and experienced players are recommended to play on tactical. As one final little question that the interviewer threw in as well, discussing the Genji armor, you can no longer be stolen from Elmdor, as it was never meant to be stolen in the first place. This was an accidental bug from the localization process that we discussed earlier in the video. It was never possible to steal Elmdor's Genji armor in the Japanese release. It has never been available in any other release other than the Western localizations, and according to the dev team, this means it is completely unobtainable, as you won't be able to get anything from the multiplayer rewards either, which is pretty much putting a nail in that coffin now that I think about it. Our last couple of points here regarding Cloud, the hero of Final Fantasy VII, who is recruitable in Final Fantasy Tactics quite late in the game and comes in essentially useless as he spawns at level 1. He doesn't have any gear or abilities. You have to go find the Materia Blade so he can even use his skills. And then once you get all of that done, you get him leveled up, his limit break skills really aren't all that great to begin with. So what does that mean for him in Ivalice Chronicles? Well, we don't know how, if at all, his abilities in the Materia Blade have been changed, but we have been told that his recruitment time has been changed to be, quote, quite early, unquote, to make him easier to use. I imagine this means that he might take the place of Luceau in terms of recruitment, but even then, that's not until Chapter 3, so it's very possible that we'll get him as early as Chapter 2, which would be awesome. It'd be really nice to actually be able to use Cloud throughout the majority of the campaign and see how he grows alongside your party. The other question that I have, though, is how this changes Cloud's scenes during his recruitment quest, and in fact, how this changes Mustadio's side quests in Gaug, as those side quests are what trigger most of the optional content and secret characters in the game, and that's originally how Cloud was found. So I'm kind of wondering if we're going to get some more character development story there with Cloud as well, and how that's going to impact everything else. Very exciting to hear, very curious to see how that's going to shake out. As our final major section here, we have to talk about the classic version of FFT that's being included in the Ivalice Chronicles, as there were a few new details that came out about that as well. First of all, while there was no one bug that was specified, the team quote-unquote fixed a lot of bugs in the classic version of FFT that is bundled in this release. So fans of the classic might have to relearn some tricks. We're not looking at like infinite JP gain tricks or anything like that, so gonna have to be a little bit more of an honest experience this time around. Balance of gameplay functionality is identical to the original release without War of the Lions tweaks, so beyond those quality of life features like the autosave and the War of the Lions script, you're not going to be seeing any changes there. And the aspect ratio is slightly widened from 4:3 to help preserve the original appearance while still looking better on widescreen HD displays. As far as my thoughts are concerned, and I know this is going to be pretty controversial with a small but very loud portion of the fan base and my community, I kind of love all this, man. You know, I had said previously when discussing the inclusion of Dark Knight and Onion Knight, I either wanted them to be completely rebalanced and introduced in the game like the rest of the jobs to have a place in the overall pantheon of classes you could play, or just have them completely removed if they weren't able to do that. Clearly, the team opted for the latter, and while I do enjoy those jobs, in particular Dark Knight, again, they were never part of the original release, and I don't think the game really loses anything by taking them out, given how kind of awkward they were to acquire and actually make usable. The loss of Luceau and Balthier, I'm more sad about. Granted, Luceau was basically just Ramza with built-in poach, but that was still a nice niche to fill, and he was a fun character to be able to play as. And then Balthier, while busted, was really cool as well with his barrage ability, his upgraded steel skills, folding that in with the machinist like arm and leg targeting abilities, and his ability to wield a whole bunch of different gear. He was just a ton of fun to play as. So even if they needed to rebalance him a little, it would have been nice to have him, but again, I get their reasoning on why they didn't include him, so I'll just have to play with him in the War of the Lions version, I suppose. As for the other missing potential content from War of the Lions, I'm a little bit more sad about that stuff. I really want multiplayer to be able to play with my buddy Eric. I'm gonna have to like call a health safety watch for him or something once he gets this news. He's gonna be extremely upset about that, I can tell you right now. And then it really comes down to if the other story and character development inclusions from War of the Lions are still in here or have been written in some way. You know, the side quest for Mustadio to get lipstick for Agrias because he has a crush on her, and that kind of burgeoning relationship was really cute. It gave you a really powerful accessory that was fun to use, and seeing more about the backstory of characters like Ovelia getting her knife, or the discussion about how Wiegraf came to join the church. Like, all really good, impactful backstory. But again, I feel like a lot of that, even if it's different from the War of the Lions version, will probably still be seen in some form or fashion because of how much has apparently been added to flesh out the characters and the world. So I have plenty of hope that we'll still see at least equivalent versions of those scenes. I'd be extremely surprised if we didn't see any version at all. As for everything else, I love it. Having direct confirmation that certain jobs are being tweaked to actually be better, if not outright, like, usable compared to how useless they were before is phenomenal. Hearing that tactical difficulty is apparently going to be that brutal and has specific gameplay changes made to it in terms of certain jobs to keep you from just completely cheesing it is great. Huge thumbs up from that. I'm absolutely going to be diving into that day one. Speaking of day one, 50 spots in the roster is phenomenal. I adore that is a thing. I cannot wait to start getting some community characters in there and seeing how their stories develop, especially with voice acting. The voice acting itself sounds like it's going to be incredible. I'm really happy with everything that we're hearing here. It seems like while it maybe won't be the quote-unquote definitive way to play Final Fantasy Tactics, since again there is some more of the Lion stuff that isn't going to be there, that I do enjoy, even if I get why it's not there. I do like that this is going to be a way for players new and old to experience the original magic of FFT that got so many of us into it in the first place. All of the updates, all the optimizations, all the quality of life, all the tweaks, it sounds like exactly what I often wish remasters would be, bringing it up to a modern standard, fixing things that need to be fixed, but then leaving as much of the original experience intact as possible is great. Would it be awesome to have a full remake as well that adds a ton of new stuff? Sure, absolutely. I would totally be down for that. But maybe this is our opportunity to get the OG FFT experience and then down the line see a new game in the series come out that has a lot of that new stuff. Let the original exist in an optimized version and then let the new exist in its own way as well. Maybe that's the optimal way to go about things. We'll have to see if it winds up happening. For now, though, again, I do implore you all, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments about all of this. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion. Again, I just ask that you be chill a little bit. I know there's going to be people who are angry and upset, but keep it polite, keep it respectful. Even if you're disappointed and want to provide criticism, that's fine. I'm not telling you can't critique these decisions if you don't like them or whatever, but we can be reasonable in the comments because, frankly, no one who's here watching this is going to be the people who have any control over any of this anyway. For now, though, I'm going to wrap this one up here. Once again, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I will be sure to keep you abreast of any new information that comes out as we come up to the release. I'm so very excited for September to roll around so we can finally experience this game together. And until then, I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.